Hey everybody, time to take another trip around the world, and we are going to start here with my koi goldfish pond, although there are quite a few other fish in this pond at this point, and that is one of the things we're going to go over. We got a lot to cover today, so we're going to move fast, and we're not going to linger on tanks where there's not much to talk about because we're going to have plenty to go over on the other tanks. So my goldfish koi pond here, we got some new additions this week. I put two new catfish in here. I can't remember their actual name, but they go by African glass catfish, which is weird because they're not those sort of clear glass-like catfish that you are probably thinking of right now. These are silvery catfish, and they have a dark stripe down their side. They're fairly reclusive, so we're not going to see a lot of them, but I do see them in the morning when I turn the lights on. They swim around for a little while until they eventually make their way into the darkness of the caves over there, and we don't see them again throughout the afternoon. I also made a big scoop out of my office tank that's full of redwag platies, and some of those redwag platies went into the pond here because I've also added new lighting to the pond. I have color changing lights that are on all four corners. Takes one of these little jobs here. We won't be able to see much of it today, but if we turn it on, you can see how we've got the color. I've got it in all four corners, and you can see how it shifts and changes and goes through all the different colors. I have it set like that because the way it illuminates the orange fish in the tank, when the red and orange lights come on, when it shifts into that color, the goldfish just pop. They look amazing. And then as it shifts through and goes into the greens and the blues, the goldfish just sort of vanish. Now, this of course is when the room is darkened and all we have is the colored lights in the pond, which gives quite a nice ambiance. We're not going to be able to see that in this video, but check out some of my other videos or subscribe, hang out for my live streams. Once we get late at night in the live streams, we usually turn the pond lights on and so on and so forth, so you'll get a better look at what those pond lights look like. I've also installed this strip of wood here. Not only does that give me a nice convenient shelf to place things while I'm doing my live stream, but under this shelf I have an aquarium light. And again, I know you can't really tell what's going on in there now because all the other lights are on, but you can see that is actually the reflection in the water. That's not the light itself. But I do have a light under there that, when all the other lights are out, gives you a nice sort of glow. So let's go ahead and turn the overhead light out, and that gives you a little bit better look at how the tank looks while it's being illuminated from within. Now, obviously, when we turn all the lights in the room out and the pond is darkened, this looks much, much better. So, really excited about that. Got the new fish in there. We already covered the new fish. Not much going on down here. I've added this pothos plant in here. I did that a while ago. I don't know whether that's been mentioned in any of my videos on this pond or not, but this is giving you a much better look at what this pond looks like with some of its new lighting in here. And we'll go ahead and turn this one out, and then you can see just with the color changing lights in there. And even with the lights on, you still get that somewhat of that effect. Now, the goldfish don't vanish when we go into the blues and greens, but they sure pop when it goes into the reds. They look like they're glowing when the light shifts to red. So I'm really, really digging the new lights in the pond. So, all right, moving on. Last look at the pond, and we do have one of these flower bracts getting ready to bloom. That's gonna be a big one. That's still completely rolled up, and it's that size. That's going to be a working flower there once it actually opens up. And I know technically it's a bract, not a flower, but whatever. I call it a flower. All right, moving on. We're going to go to the 29 miscellaneous tank here. If you've ever wondered why I call this the 29 Miscellaneous Tank, from way back in the day when I was early on in my fish keeping, I had so many different things in this tank, and while my other tanks were sort of settling into a Gourami tank and an Angelfish tank and a brackish tank, this tank always got switched around and rearranged, and I put new stuff in it and changed up the stock, and it never really had any theme to it other than its size. It's a 29-gallon tank, and so it's just became my 29 Miscellaneous, and that's just what I've called it ever since. Now, judging by how aggressive my angelfish is getting right there, I'm going to guess that she is getting ready to spawn. I'm almost surprised we're not seeing some eggs on the glass already. She doesn't have a mate, so none of the eggs are fertilized, but she does spawn fairly often, and she does lay her eggs on the glass, and whenever she does that, she gets really aggressive towards the other fish in the tank, and we'll see her chasing everybody around. And in fact, you can kind of tell everybody's sort of over here and giving her that half of the tank. She's huddled up in that corner, so I expect within the next 24 hours we're going to see some eggs being laid in this tank as well. But otherwise, as usual with my 29, not much to talk about, nothing really going on, no changes. This tank just kind of ticks over like a clock, and I very, very rarely have to do anything to it, including water changes. I do about 2 water changes a year on this tank. I wipe the glass down about once a year probably, and otherwise I don't really worry too much about it. It just ticks over like a clock. So we're going to move on to the Gourami tank. Nothing to really talk about in here, so we're not going to linger on it too long. Like I say, we've got a lot to go over on the other tanks where we have done some stuff. But other than the glass needing to be wiped down, nothing really to talk about with the Gourami tank. My striped Raphael's lying out in full view, so we'll get a nice good look at him for a moment. He's probably about 8 or 9 inches long total at this point. And now he's nestled his way back into his normal cave where he's going to continue to hide. All the gouramis are doing well. All the loaches are doing well. I have considered adding some loaches to this tank, possibly some coolie loaches. I did lose a coolie loach in this tank a couple of weeks ago. I don't know whether I've ever mentioned that or not, but I did have a dead coolie loach in this tank. And so possibly I might want to add 1 or 2 more of those because they're a lot of fun, especially when they get together in groups. So that's about it as far as the Gourami tank goes. Again, just the glass needs to be wiped down, but otherwise everything is doing fine in there. My 55 here, you may notice a few new additions, about 25 or 30 new additions to be exact. This is where the bulk of those red wag platies that was in my office tank got deposited after I scooped them up. Put them in here, figuring that if they do breed between all of those various tetras, I've got the diamond tetras, I've got the Buenos Aires tetras, and then of course I've got the discus. And I would imagine between all of those fish, they should keep the red wag platy population in check. I don't think their fry are going to get out of control with that many predatory fish in the tank. But I added a new betta fish to my office tank, and as overly crowded as it was, I think it was just a little bit stressful for the betta. And so I thinned out the population a little bit. It's getting along just fine. It doesn't seem to be bothered by the fish in the tank. It was just the sheer number of fish in the tank. And so now that we've thinned that out, I took about 2/3 of the red wag platies out of that tank, and I put them in here. So you can see how many are in this tank. Imagine how many used to. They all came out of a 20 long. This is most of them, but probably a dozen of them went into the pond as well that we were just looking at. Now, they might have been gobbled up because a lot of them were very small, and I don't doubt that those koi would take advantage of eating small fish if they got the opportunity. I don't know, but I didn't see any little fish swimming around in the pond when we were looking at it a few minutes ago. Maybe if I review the video, we'll see some more of those. But I did put a bunch of those red wag platies in the pond, but most of them went in here, and there's still 15 or 20 of them in the tank upstairs in the office. So you can imagine how densely packed a 20 long was. And so you can see why I removed some of them to make it a little more comfortable for the betta fish that I just put in there. So moving on to my 40 breeder here. First, we're going to have a real quick look at my spotted tilapia flow. We're going to go out of order for a moment, but I'm afraid by the time we get back to this tank, she's going to be back hiding in her corner. As I stand here and boom my voice at her, it's probably going to push her back into her corner, and we don't often get a very clear look at her just sitting out in the open like this. She's such a beautiful fish. She really is. And you start getting close and you start looking at all those colors in her tail fin and all the little white tracery around her fins. She's really an amazing fish. So that's a spotted tilapia, and that is a West African fish. And again, it is very kind of her to just sit there and let us get such a good view like that. And I do say her because she spawns occasionally as well. She'll become aggressive. You can see that back corner's been all cleared of gravel and everything. That's kind of her corner. And she gets back in there and lays eggs and whatnot from time to time. So I know it's a her. So anyway, backing up to our 40 breeder here. We have added some new fish to this tank as well. We added 2 of these flying fox. Unfortunately, I did not realize they were jumpers. One came out of the tank in the morning when I turned the lights on for the first time. And by the time I got around and noticed it on the floor, it was still alive, but I got it back in the tank and it did not look good. It didn't look too promising. And so I left it there. I left it in the tank. And as of now, I've not seen 2 of them. I only see this one. And prior to that, they were together all the time. They swam side by side. They followed each other around the tank. And so the fact that I've only seen one for the last several days now, I'm going to assume that I did not get the other one back in the tank in time, and we don't have it anymore. It's just died and rotted away in the tank. Speaking of dying and rotting away in the tank, I'm probably going to be shooting a video on that very topic here pretty soon. These are bleeding heart tetras. I put a little school of 6 of them in here. And they are going to look amazing once they grow in. Really, really interesting fish. I kind of expected them to behave like the black skirts, but they're not. They're very... They tend to stay in a school much more, or grouped together. As you can see, they're all just sort of right there by each other's side. But you can also see how quick their movements are. They dart and dash around, not in a frantic sort of way, but in a really interesting sort of way. They're very, very fast fish. And at feeding time, when the food goes in there, they go nuts. And it's really interesting watching them dash around the way they do while they're feeding. So those are new. The flying fox are new, but again, we're already down to just one single flying fox. Very attractive fish. Does not seem to be doing squat diddly to deal with the hair algae, which is kind of the experiment. I only got the flying fox because I wanted to find out for myself if they were any good at hair algae. I've always heard that they're not very good, or they're not as good as their look-alike. Although when you really see them together, they don't look alike at all. But a similar looking fish is the Siamese algae eater. And the Siamese algae eater will absolutely destroy that hair algae. So we'll be shooting some video about that too at some point in the future. We're going to discuss the differences between the two and how to identify which is which. Again, there's a lot of confusion a lot of times with the Siamese algae eater and the flying fox. Hang on a minute. There's a flying fox right there. Never mind, we've got 2 of them. I don't know why they're not together anymore. For the first few days they were in there, they were almost inseparable. But there is one flying fox right there. And there's the other one right there. So you witnessed it here, everybody. I thought for sure we had a dead flying fox in the tank. But now we have confirmed both of them are still alive. You can see both of them in the same frame right there. Fantastic. And then, of course, we've got my angelfish, Frank Gorshin, hiding in the back there. Don't know why he's so shy for an angelfish. I actually put some other fish in the tank in hopes that these would behave something like ditherfish for the angelfish. Typically, you will have to get ditherfish to get these kind of fish to come out of hiding. You know, you put some guppies in there, you put some other fish that swim around out in the open, and then it lets these fish know, like, okay, it's safe to swim out in the open, and you'll see them more often. I was hoping the same, or the opposite of that, would sort of happen with the angelfish. The angelfish seems to hide so much that I thought maybe if there was some other fish out swimming around, maybe the angelfish would come out, and we get to see a little more of that, but alas, we do not. It still stays hidden back there. Alright, we are going to move on to the 125-gallon New World tank. Now, I know I just pointed out that I've got a fish in there from Africa. I've got an Indonesian rainbow shark in there. And I also have a jewel cichlid in there, which is another African fish. But otherwise, all of the fish that are in this tank are either North or South American, Central American, and so they're mostly New World fish. And when I named the tank my New World tank, that's all that was in there, really. And over time, just by necessity, we've ended up with that tilapia and that shark, and then eventually I put that jewel cichlid in there, and so we've got a little bit of a mishmash of different fish from around the world in there, even though I generally call this my New World tank. And the playlist for this tank, if you're interested in seeing more video, is my New World tank. That's how you'd find this on my channel. But otherwise, we don't have much going on in this tank right now. Just looking kind of good. It's in need of some maintenance. We're probably going to get in there this Friday night when I do my live streams. Again, I do a live stream every Friday night and Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you check those out, this Friday we're probably going to get in here and do some tank maintenance, get that water change done, get the glass wiped down, and just get the tank looking nice and tip-top shape again. Otherwise, like I said, nothing really going on in there, so we're going to move on. Snail tank, nothing really to speak of. Bucket just has a pothos plant in it, and you can see it goes up and over and around the room, and so we're not going to go over the whole pothos plant thing again today. Not really necessary. One thing I did forget to point out in the pond, but I can mention now while we're looking at my fancy goldfish tank. Fancy goldfish tank is how this would be labeled on my channel, but I usually refer to this as my ham tank. And I do so because you can see how every one of these fish just hams it up as soon as I get in front of it, and they think they're going to get food if they look adorable enough, and they do all their little wiggles and waggles and their upside downs and cartwheels and rollovers and everything else. And again, they really ham it up whenever I get in front of this tank. So we just got the glass wiped down the other day. It's looking really good. All of these fish are looking absolutely fabulous. We got Wednesday up here. That's the blackfish. That is probably the fanciest fish I own. It is a peacock fantail oranda. And I know it's hard to tell, but she really does have that brain sac. It's just a very dainty little brain sac. She's the only one I know the sex of, and that is a female. As far as the other three, I have no idea what they are. So Melissa fish here, the smaller one, is also an oranda. You can see the dainty brain sac developing on her, or it, or whatever. And then we've got Bruce Brown, which is just a fantail. He doesn't have any kind of brain sac at all. And then, of course, we got Blackie, who's got the brain sackiest of brain sacs you're ever going to see. But he is awesome. And again, that wen, which is what that brain sac is technically called. I just like calling it a brain sac because that sounds funnier. But the wen on this one is absolutely enormous. At least by comparison to everybody else in the tank. So that's just a look at the fish, just because they're awesome, and I wanted to talk about them for a moment. Otherwise, nothing new going on in this tank. Again, join me Friday night for the live stream. You can see we're getting some backflow in here. We're getting some backflow on this filter. So we will be getting in here on Friday night and doing a little bit of work. But what I wanted to point out was, look at my red tiger lotus. When I did a bunch of division, I separated a bunch of the red tiger lotus out of this tank, which we'll be looking at in a minute. I took 6 or 8 bulbs out of here, whatever you call them, rhizomes. I'm not sure what they're considered. I guess bulbs would be close enough. And one of them I planted in here, and it didn't do anything for the longest time. It just sort of died back, but apparently it had simply gone dormant, and now it is sprouting new leaves, and they look fantastic. So I'm really excited about that. I'm hoping we're going to get some lily pads floating on the surface, and then we'll get some tiger lotus flower blooming on the surface here. So that should be pretty swank once that happens. So cross your fingers and hope those lily pads keep growing and the tiger lotus gets a chance to do its thing. That gives you a bit of a look at how fancy that fancy goldfish tail is. You can see why they call it a peacock fantail. That's not just an ordinary fantail. It's a fancy fantail. So the point about the pond was, I know at the moment you can't see it, but, well, you can kind of see it. There is a planter right here, and if you see this little light spot, that is a red tiger lotus. I planted it in there a long time ago, and nothing ever happened, and now I'm actually getting a leaf coming out on it, so that is exciting. And I also forgot to mention, I put some other plants in here. I put some Java fern in here, and I thought as of last night that it was doing well, but as of today, I realize it's getting devoured. We've got a piece in the corner here that you can't really see because it's so chewed up already. I did have a piece, there's a planter right here you can see. I put a piece in there. That's already been pulled out and gone. It's floated away. It's over back behind here. And then I got one down here planted in the rocks, and that one still looks okay, but all the other Java I put in there is already been chomped on by those goldfish. So again, it will be interesting to see if this tiger lotus does okay. And look, we left him alone for a few minutes and he already fell asleep. I don't know if he has a lot of trouble carrying that head sack around or what, but you leave him alone for 5 minutes and you come back and he'll just be sleeping. He has his head down, his face is down in the gravel, and he just lays there and goes dormant. It's actually adorable watching him sleep. So anyway, moving back on to the 125-gallon Discus Tank. Somewhere in there a minute ago, I saw my Tilapia. There he is. He's hiding way back in that corner. I'm not sure why he's so buried back there, but he's definitely hiding in the corner. And we have several other of the discus down here at this end of the tank. Got a few of the discus down at this end of the tank. And interestingly, we no longer have any in the corner. I have 2 that have paired off and have spawned 3 times in the last week. So I got in there, I unplugged the heater in the corner. You can see that internal heater. And they kept laying their eggs on that heater. Possibly because of the warmth, I'm thinking. But I also know that every time the heater would kick on, it would simply kill the eggs. You know, that the temperature of the glass on that heater gets way too hot for those eggs to survive. So if I ever want the eggs to survive, and I kind of would like to see that happen someday, I had to unplug that heater. And since I've done so, it seems like the fish are no longer interested in spawning back in that corner. I wonder if the warmth, because I only keep this tank at about 80 degrees, and so I'm wondering if the heat from that heater was not what was encouraging them to spawn on it. So that's kind of interesting. Well, that one's kind of drifting back into that corner again. I believe it's these 2 here are the 2 that have paired off, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So that is really about all that we've got going on here in the discus tank. I didn't have a lot to talk about on this one, but this tank always looks so good. And of course those discus are so beautiful. And my Tilapia that we just saw there is such an amazing fish. I always like trying to get a few minutes worth of looking at this tank. And everybody's probably drifting down to this end because they think they're going to get some nummies here anytime. And you can see how he's up there getting air off the surface. That's because it is an anabantoid, or a labyrinth fish. It's closely related to the gouramis and the betta fish. They're all in the same family. And you just saw it go up to the surface and gulp a little bit of air to put in its labyrinth organ. And it can actually draw additional oxygen out of that air that it stores in its head. So there you go, just a quick look at that. We'll have a look on the inside just in case I've got any lotus flower blooming. I know I have a flower spike sticking up down there, but it doesn't look like it's going to bloom, so we're not going to get to see much in the way of flower bloom on that one, but you got to see what the inside of the surface of the tank looks like anyway. So alright everybody, tearing ourselves away from this tank and this big old fat anabantoid, we can come over here to my 20 and we can have a look at my brand new anabantoid. So this is a delta tail male betta fish, and on my members stream last week I got to chatting and we got to talking about betta fish, and I actually sort of talked myself into getting one. And when we were talking about where I would put it, this tank just seemed absolutely perfect. I've got an air stone, but it's turned down low enough that that doesn't give me a ton of circulation. I've got a small power head in the bottom to move some water around, but again, not a huge amount of circulation. And you can see I've added this sponge there to disrupt the outflow of the water, and so the filter's still running and flowing just fine. We're moving tons of water through there, but it's just going through this sponge before it flows back into the tank, and therefore at worst we get a little bit of water sort of dribbling down out of the filter and into the tank, and that's not causing too much in the way of water circulation either. So we got my banjo catfish in this tank. Sorry about all the glare. Let's see if I can stand in front of it and block a little bit of it. I don't think so. Too much light coming from behind us. So that's my banjo catfish. He's still in there doing well. My African water fern is doing great. And I often find my betta fish in here, whose name is Gil Galad, by the way. So this is one of the few fish I've actually named. So I do see Gil Galad here hanging out in that water fern. It's just under the surface, and as you probably know with the betta fish, they like to lay on leaves and lay right up near the surface where they can relax but still be right by the nice oxygenated water near the surface. And so far he's working out fantastic. Very, very happy with the results so far. Nothing for once is in my quarantine tank, so we're going to get in there and do a cleaning on that and so on and so forth one of these days. I also have this little tank that I found, so we're thinking maybe we might be thinking about another little betta fish and setting up another small tank, although that at this point is still a very, very big maybe. I already know the missus is not happy about the idea, so we'll have to see. So in conclusion, we will check out Butterbean for a moment. Again, nothing really going on in this tank or anything to really talk about, but I did want to give everybody a quick look at Butterbean before the video is over. I want to try to wrap this up in half an hour so that I don't have to try to edit clips together. We can do this all in one shot. I'm shooting this on my phone, and my phone splits the file at about 30 minutes and some change, maybe 31 minutes or something like that, and I don't want to have to stitch two files together, so we're going to go ahead and get this video wrapped up with Butterbean here. Again, nothing to really talk about. I haven't done anything, made any changes. All the guppies that were in this tank with him have passed away, and I'm actually considering finding him a new tank mate or some tank mates, possibly just some of those red wag platies out of my office tank, possibly some bumblebee gobies. I don't know. It's hard to say what I might put in there. You can see I'm getting a little bit of new growth on the Anubias now that we're no longer in brackish water. But there you go. We're all the way around the world where we started. So thanks again for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you're subscribed, and don't forget to check out my live streams every Friday and Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.